Yes, it is visible now.
Great.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Great. Before I continue, if I could please ask all of the colleagues to mute yourself. I understand that sometimes you may unmute yourself incidentally. We really don't want to disrupt the rest of the team. To put into the structure of how today's next 2 hours will go, so the first 45 to 50 minutes, I will take you through the process and the developments and the outcomes and what's coming on the compensation review. And then the remaining of the time we will have to share our opinions, ideas, and your reflections. One thing which I would like to make clear from the very beginning here is that we are talking today about the compensation package for international recruited staff members. This is the focus of the ongoing review. The review is not looking at the compensation package for locally recruited staff members. You're more than welcome to stay in this briefing and to get to know what elements of the compensation package for international recruited staff members are. It may also be useful for you to understand what the general global trend is, because what happens in the package for the international recruited staff members is likely to be replicated for the locally recruited colleagues when the review period comes, and most probably it will be in the near future. The second disclaimer is that, unfortunately, I don't have the crystal ball to tell you what the outcome of the compensation review will be. I will be sharing with you the knowledge and the facts that we have confirmed last year, the knowledge and the facts that we have confirmed based on the current 6 months of engaging with all of the relevant stakeholders who are at the decision-making level, as well as our predictions and our assumptions of how the final review will look like, with the caveat that because we are not in the decision-making level, whatever I will be presenting to you today as potential outcome may or may not change depending on the decision of the final authority. So please don't hold me accountable if in January next year, some of the things which I will be presenting as potential impact will go in a different way. I will take you through the entire process as gently and as easily as possible. I would kindly ask you to please not write in chat if you have some questions while I'm presenting. I'm not able to follow the chat, unfortunately, and we don't have a moderator for this session, but there will be a time after I finish my presentation to ask your questions and clarifications. So let's get going. So today we will be looking at 3 issues. The review process. I'll tell you why it happens, how it happens, who are in the driving seat, who are the decision-making level people, and what will be potentially the final product of the entire process. I will also look into the facts that we can get from the last year General Assembly resolution. Some of the colleagues who may have attended previous sessions in last year will find some of the information repetitive. This is to once again put us on the same page. This resolution that General Assembly adopted last year is quite telling. It has several elements which let us predict what is there to come in future, and future being next year as well as the next 10 years. I will also give you an overview of the developments and trends. And once again, I want to reemphasize here that these are our assumptions based on the knowledge that we have. Everything what I will be presenting here is possible only because FICSA has been advocating for the compensation package to remain fit for purpose, flexible, and agile, even though these are quite perhaps commonly used words in WHO. In the current review, they are very relevant words. And everything what I will be presenting to you today from the perspective of knowledge is also what we are benefiting from our membership in FICSA. The amount of information that this presentation will cover will be substantial, as I'm putting you already into the quite, hopefully, important listening mode. But I will try to really digest it and to break it to a very easy to understand way, particularly for the colleagues who may not be dealing with these issues on a daily basis. Before we look into the entire review process, I would like to talk about the main actors that are engaged in this process. I'll start with the International Civil Service Commission. You would often hear it as to be referred as ICSC or the Commission.
Pick it. Oh, you want to turn it here?
I'm sorry, can you please mute yourself? Thank you.
Sasha, you're unmuted.
Sasha, you're muted.
I'm not sure who muted me. Okay.
And now
Can you hear me?
we don't see presentation anymore. Now, okay. Just
Okay, great.
yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. So, great. We discussed this, and now we go to the main stakeholders. We start with the International Civil Service Commission. That's our main partner that we are engaging throughout the entire lifespan of the UN Common System on the matters relating to this stuff. What is this International Civil Service Commission? It's an independent expert body which was established by the UN General Assembly. It is important to mention that it is not one of the regular or traditional UN agencies like WHO, like UNICEF, like WFP, UNHCR. It is not. It is an independent expert body that reports directly to the United Nations General Assembly. It was established with one sole purpose: to oversee all matters that relate to the employment conditions of UN staff. So everybody who has a UN index, whether you are on a continuous, fixed term, or a temporary appointment, your employment conditions will be set by the International Civil Service Commission once they are approved by the General Assembly. The scope of the work that the Civil Service Commission does goes into two streams. The first stream is that it has the authority to decide on certain elements of the compensation package. There is also the authority of them to recommend to the General Assembly on the other set of the compensation package. And these are clearly stated in the statute of the International Civil Service Commission. On the items that fall within the scope of the decision of the Civil Service Commission, these are the main issues. They relate to the per diem levels, they relate to the post-adjustment index, they relate to how often and how regular post-adjustment surveys are conducted, what category of duty stations are attributed to where the UN staff is present. So this is where they decide. There is a different set of elements that the Civil Service Commission oversees. It doesn't decide, but it makes recommendation to the GA for either approval or disapproval. And these are quite fundamental, and these are basically what are currently under the review. One of the main elements is that the Civil Service Commission proposes to the GA the salary scale. It also proposes to the GA post-adjustment multiplier. We know it as just post-adjustment. It also sets the allowance in terms of dependency, child benefits with disability and whatnot, as well as other elements relating to the repatriation, education, home leave grants, and whatnot. The International Civil Service Commission has its statute. It defines its work. Agencies that adopt the statute of the International Civil Service Commission are then bound to follow its decisions or its recommendations. This is quite an important sentence. Please keep it in your mind. Later on in the presentation, I will refer to it. Once again, to recap, agencies which adopted the statute of the Civil Service Commission are bound by its decisions. WHO is one of those agencies that adopted the statute of the Civil Service Commission. So the Civil Service Commission basically is this technical body which is trying to calculate, which is trying to define, which is trying to set the rules. On one elements it decides, but mostly it recommends. The second important player in the entire review process is the fifth committee. UN General Assembly consists of 6 committees. One of them deals with social and educational matters and cultural matters. The other deals with political affairs. There's a legal committee. The fifth committee is the one that deals with entire issues relating to administration and budgetary issues of the entire common system, of which, of course, WHO is. This is the committee which basically will tell to the General Assembly how much money is coming, how much money is being spent, where we can do the savings, how we can optimize our revenue and our expenses. The fifth committee consists of members that are elected on a rotational basis once every 3 years. They are the representatives of the member states. Normally, they would be based in New York, not necessarily. They may be also flying in and out of their capitals, but these are political figures who are selected by the member states. The fifth committee has a very clear also mandate. As I mentioned, it deals with the entire spectrum of admin and budgetary matters of the common system. They report to the General Assembly on all matters that relate to the condition of service for the UN civil servants. They also recommend to specialized agencies, one of them being WHO. And now we have the third, and I would say the most important player, because this is the player that takes the final decision. It's the General Assembly itself. The unique element of the General Assembly is that it deals with everything what touches United Nations system, whether it is political matters, peace building, staff matters, financial matters. They have the final say. We cannot appeal, we cannot sue them, we cannot object. Their say is the final say. What they deal with is they set the staff regulations. They decide on what the fifth committee proposes to them, either agreeing or disagreeing. They also can make requests to the fifth committee and to the Civil Service Commission if further work needs to be done. And one of the tinier parts of their work is this, that they review some administrative reports, but that's not really relevant for the purpose of today's presentation. So these are the 3 main players that by default take part in any review of the compensation package. The Civil Service Commission does the technical work. The fifth committee tries to assess the feasibility vis-a-vis the overall situation in the United Nations. And the General Assembly has the final say whether to agree, to disagree, to instruct, to authorize, or to decline. Now, when we look at the current review process that has been going on for quite a while, it didn't start this year, it didn't start last year. The review processes are not uncommon in the common system vis-a-vis the compensation package. In general, they happen once every 10 years. This time, it's the second time when the review process is happening on the 5th year after the most recent review took place. We've had that once, now it's repeating again. Of course, it puts an unnecessary burden for the International Civil Service Commission because the amount of work that needs to be done and the amount of information to be analyzed is quite substantial. It puts a very unnecessary workload and pressure on our management because the management needs to provide that information through their participation, through their discussions, through their analytical notes. But it also puts quite a lot of pressure on the staff associations and on FICSA itself in trying to ensure that whatever is being reviewed and how it is being reviewed still protects the interests of staff to the best of their ability, to the best of the rules and regulations, but also reflecting the reality. So the current process, we could say, began almost 5 years ago when the General Assembly adopted the resolution in 2021 and then another resolution in 2022 requesting the International Civil Service Commission to initiate a comprehensive review of compensation package. At the end of 2023, International Civil Service Commission established 3 working groups, each of them tasked with a specific mandate to look at the compensation package. The first working group was looking at the overall structure of the package to understand whether the current compensation package is fit for purpose, whether some things may be duplicated, whether there are any elements which are obsolete, which are not practiced. So they're not looking at the nitty-gritty, they were looking at the higher structure of the package. The second working group was looking at specifically family benefits, so child, education, secondary dependent, children with disability, and whatnot. And the third working group was looking specifically at field benefits. So basically everything what colleagues who serve in non-HQ duty stations would be eligible to apply. Hardship, mobility, danger pay, R&R, accelerated home leaves, so on and so forth. The 3 working groups have been meeting quite regularly. They consist of the representatives of the Civil Service Commission. They have the representatives from the 5th committee, the political figures. They also have the representatives from the management of the organizations. WHO is participating in those discussions, not in all working groups, but in most of them. As well as all 3 staff federations are part of each discussion of the working group. FICSA has been physically present as well as present online for every single meeting of the working group that has been taking place since their establishment. The amount of information that we've been reading corresponds most probably to thousands, if not tens of thousands of pages. The amount of discussions and meetings can equally amount to 1,000 hours, because every single line, every single proposal that was looked at needed to go through the discussion of the working group. And of course, we needed to make sure that whatever the final proposal would be is balanced to reflect the current situation in the world. We all are aware of the financial limitations, but also to ensure that the financial limitations are not used as the reason to cut. So the working groups met in 2024. There were 2 meetings of each working group. They also met in 2025, and there was a follow-up meeting in 2026 with the working group 1 and 3 meeting this year. The working groups have concluded their work, and now comes the most critical part of the process, the remaining 6 months, apologies, and they will consist of 2 fundamental meetings. The first meeting is taking place in July in Vienna. It's the 102nd session of the International Civil Service Commission, where all of the recommendations, all of the proposals, all of the discussions will be collected together, looked and structured, and consolidated in the report with recommendations that will be submitted to the 81st session of the General Assembly in New York in autumn this year. GA will look at that report, will look at the recommendation, and will hopefully produce a resolution with its final conclusions on the compensation review. FICSA will be present at this critical moment, both at the 102nd International Civil Service Commission meeting in Vienna. The entire executive committee will be present there. We will be continuing to looking very carefully at what the proposals are to ensure that nothing is taken out, nothing is added what wasn't agreed, and to advocate for the best of the interest of the colleagues. We will also be present for almost 2 months in New York. Not all of us, of course, for 2 months, but for the critical sessions, for the critical meetings, when the final discussions and deliberations will take place. Why I'm emphasizing on this particular element? Through our membership in FICSA, we can actually access these two avenues. The semi-annual meetings of the Civil Service Commission, they took twice per year, as well as the annual meeting of UNGA. Through our membership in FICSA, we can only do this. We cannot write directly to ICSC. We cannot engage directly with the Fifth Committee or with UNGA. This is only possible through our engagement with FICSA. FICSA is one of the 3 federations globally that has the mandate to engage with the Civil Service Commission, to engage with the member states, to engage with the Fifth Committee. And of course, we are taking every single opportunity that we have and even more to advocate for the interests of staff. FICSA is not only representing WHO interest, FICSA is representing the interests of all of its member states with a specific focus on specialized agencies like FAO, WHO, UNIDO, UNESCO, and so on and so forth. So now, this is about the process. As you can see, it's a 6-year or 5-year process. Hopefully, the next review will not take place in 5 years, and we will actually be looking at going back to what was the tradition, which is a periodic, predictable review once every 10 years. Now, this resolution perhaps is one of the most important resolutions that was adopted by the General Assembly on the issue related to UN Common System staff in the last 10 years. The resolution itself is quite short. It's 3-4 pages. What is unique about it is that this resolution has been adopted without a vote. It's not the first time that this happens, but it happens extremely rarely that UN resolutions are adopted without the vote. They also decided not to take any action on this particular agenda item. Why this is also quite unique? The UN General Assembly agenda from September to December consists of multiple thematic sessions. The agenda item UN Common System, in this case is agenda item 80 or 236, has been taking place in September, October, November through several sessions, each lasting for 2-3 hours, where all of the proposals that were relevant for that year have been discussed. FICSA was participating in those sessions through its membership and engagement with the Fifth Committee and ICSC, and now we have this particular product. The unique thing about this resolution is what it contains now, as the adopted version, is completely different from what it could have been if FICSA didn't mobilize its resources to go again to New York and actually to discuss the draft that was proposed for the adoption. I cannot share with you the proposed draft. It's a confidential document that FICSA was shared by the friends, let's put it this way. But the moment we saw that common draft, we immediately understood that this is going to be absolutely unacceptable. What we have right now in this resolution is miles, if not tens of miles ahead of what could have been and what would have been the impact for the common system in terms of benefits and allowances. So this resolution consisted of 2 parts. It gave decisions to the UN legislative organs of other participating organizations, as well as to the executive heads. I'll focus on these 2 elements. So on the first part, the General Assembly resolution confirmed that there would be a new unified base floor salary, and it would increase by 1.6% comparing to the base floor salary from 2025. And in increasing this base floor salary by 1.6%, it would reduce the post-adjustment multiplier accordingly. I will discuss that a bit later to give you more details. It also reported 117 margin and requested the Commission to take action. Just remember this sentence right now. I will explain to you later what the margin is and why it is so important for this particular discourse. It approved a revised standard of conduct. Those of you who would be interested to read it, it will be available through this link. It's a quite interesting document because it changes several things, how the UN Common System may or may not operate, particularly in the current world where a lot of conflicts take place. For the first time, they also specifically mentioned that teleworking is not a right and not an entitlement. This is the first time that has happened in the GA resolution vis-à-vis common system. They also requested the Civil Service Commission to design common framework to adjust the elements of the compensation package for those colleagues who telework for more than 60 cumulative working days. In the context of WHO, we have already some policies in place which are reflecting what benefits and allowances get if a person teleworks for more than 60 days, but these are not synchronized and harmonized across the common system. So the Commission was tasked to design such a framework in the coming years. Now, to the heads of the executive heads of participation organizations, there were several decisions. Two of them are quite straightforward. They were relating to the salaries of locally recruited staff members for Montreal and Paris. This is quite a normal procedure, nothing major here. What was quite telling is this. The resolution reminded to the executive heads of participating organizations that its decisions are binding. And if organizations don't implement the decisions of the GA, then the organization's participation in the pension fund may be suspended or cancelled. This is also the first time that such specific reference to both the pension fund and to the fact that GA decisions are binding was put forward. And if you remember if you recall what I mentioned earlier, that WHO is one of the agencies that adopted the statute of ICRC, therefore its decisions and recommendations are binding. Well, the General Assembly reaffirmed this statement and mentioned that be careful, if you don't implement, you will be out of the pension fund. It is not relating to the WHO, fortunately. It relates to some organizations that were delaying the implementation of the parental leave, as well as of some other elements relating to the compensation package and the change in the staff rules and regulations. This is quite an important element because it also tells you where the discourse may go in the coming years. The third element, which was in the resolution, which was sort of predicted, unfortunately, is that there were no changes to the amounts which are paid for the child allowance, the allowance for child with disability, for secondary dependents, and for the education grant. I will mention later in the presentation what potential developments vis-à-vis these elements of the compensation may be, but for the time being, the resolution said we keep these elements and the rates will be as they have been in past. So let's maybe focus on the three elements of this particular resolution and why they are so important for the ongoing compensation review, primarily the first two. So as you know, every year we have this base floor salary, which establishes the base floor payment for all international recruit staff members, and that scale then feeds into our pensionable remuneration. We've seen it increase by 1.6%, quite modest increase, but still any increase is a positive increase. We didn't see the increase that we saw 2 years ago when the floor went by almost 10%, but we also didn't see what happened 3 or 4 years ago when the base floor remained at zero. To achieve no loss, no gain principle, the moment we increase our base floor salary by a corresponding percent, by the same percent, our post adjustment needs to decrease for January. Going forward, as you may be aware, in February, there's always the revision of the post adjustment multiplier that balances things out. For most of duty station, the post adjustment multiplier will go up. So in reality, we see both the increase of the base floor as well as the increase of the PAM. Therefore, the entire take-home compensation also increases for us. There was this report on 117 margin. So I will deal a bit later on the next slide what this means, but just to put in the perspective, margin is the range that allows UN staff based in New York to earn more than the equivalent position of the federal employee in Washington, D.C. So if we have, for instance, a secretary working in UN office in New York, earning a certain amount, that salary can be higher than the salary of the equivalent secretary working in the Department of Defense, for instance, within a certain range. I will provide you the ranges which are applicable on the next page and what it means for the UN and what it means for the compensation review. So the Commission reported, the GA reported that this is this number, meaning that UN salary in New York, therefore all of our salaries who don't work in New York, given that we are linked to New York, so all of our salaries are higher than the equivalent position of the US federal employee in DC by 17%. On the third item, which is revised standards of conduct, the document outlines specific elements which are quite telling. I've picked up three which I think are very important for us to remember, and for the staff associations, particularly if you would like to up your game of the relationship with the management, but also to guide all of us in this quite politically complex world. So they updated some of the elements for the post-employment conditions. These are rather straightforward and nothing to focus on. It just synchronizes and harmonizes the entire system. They've also given clear message of the importance of maintaining staff management relationship. So in the staff associations that do not have regular exchange with the management at the level of DPM, DAFs, BOSS, RD, this is maybe something that you may want to look at to initiate the discussion and to give validity and justification why you want that relationship with the senior management of the organization. The third element, which was also included in the revised standards of conduct, is how staff are supposed to behave vis-a-vis their relationship with member states. The focus was made whether staff can criticize or not member states. The answer is no. And whether the staff can express their personal interests as well as personal opinions about political events. The response is also no. They give some specific references, some wording. In some of the regions of WHO, this may be particularly important and useful to educate our colleagues so that they know what is allowed, what is not allowed. Now, let's talk about the margins. As I mentioned, margins is the range that UN General Assembly allows for the UN salary in New York to be higher than the salary of an equivalent position in Washington, D.C. The range is between 110 and 120, meaning that overall, our salary can be 10 to 20% higher than the equivalent salary in Washington, D.C. Ideally, it should be at what is called the midpoint, 100%, 115. So our salary should be at 115% higher than the than the Washington, D.C. Salary. However, this is very difficult to achieve. And so then the GA deconstructed this 110 to 120 into subsets, but also prescribe what happens if it goes up or whether it goes down. Ideal range that the GA recommends is 113 to 117. This is when the system is stable. We can do our planned revisions. We can do our post adjustments. We can expect the raise of the salary. Everything is predictable. Everything is fine. This is accepted by the member states. Ideally, between 113 to 117, it should be 115. If it goes to 113 or if it goes to 117, that's fine. 113 being the lowest balance possible, 117 sort of being the highest possible that the colleagues. I'm sorry. Can you still hear me? Yes, great. So 117 being the highest possible margin that is still okay, but the International Civil Service Commission needs to be very careful and to start monitoring what is going to happen. The moment it crosses 117 and goes to 118, as long as it doesn't go beyond 120, so our salary is still higher than the salary of DC by maximum 20%, the Commission will take no action. It will just look for the natural correction, which means it will wait while the salary of the DC employees will go up. The moment it goes to 121 and higher, that's where the problem begins, and problem is a word in quotation marks. It doesn't mean that the moment our salary is 21 and higher percent more than the DC salary that we stop getting salaries or that our salaries are being deducted or frozen. No, it means that for the next round, when there is a salary scale revision, maybe no action will be taken. So salary scale will remain as it was last year. Or maybe the increase will not be 1.9% as it was last year, but maybe it will be 0.01. Or the Commission may decide to increase the base floor because it has direct impact on our pensionable remuneration, but it will be quite conservative with a post-adjustment. So there is a way to correct it. Of course, we don't want to go that way, but things can happen. Equally, if the margin goes lower than 113, but still stays up to 110, the Commission normally doesn't take any action. It tries for this natural correction. Maybe we do a couple of surveys to up the salary of the UN staff to match the one in DC. When it goes to lower than 110, meaning we earn less than 10% more than the staff in Washington, DC, the measures which are outlined under 121 and more in the opposite side will take place. Once it goes less than 110, it means that we are not attracting enough people from the outside because we are not a competitive employer. We are simply not attractive for people to leave their national service, to leave their national commitments, and to work for the international organization. The main purpose of these margins is to ensure that the UN can attract and retain the best of the class from each country. And to do that, you need to have a very adequate pay. The pay was established 110, 120, ideally 115. If it goes lower, we lose our competitiveness. Why am I spending so much time about this margin? This is the only way to predict the move of the salary upwards or downwards, and also to predict to which extent we are a competitive employer or not. It is the only way that we can also impact our pensionable remuneration and our future pension. And it is an integral part of the entire common system to maintain its impartiality and neutrality by having staff from all across the world to be working for UN common system. This is something that we are protecting very dearly, and I will mention later on the slides why it is critical in this particular discourse, because there are some plans to look at this from a different perspective. So just to recap back, last year's resolution stated that the margin went up to 117. So we've reached our absolutely highest point where we are okay. If there are further increases, that means that we need to be paying attention how much is the increase. And if the increase goes above 121, perhaps we will not see a salary increase next year or somewhat conservative increase. For the time being, we are okay. We don't know what the outcomes of the US salary survey will be, but at least now we've reached the upper limit of what is acceptable without further action required from the Civil Service Mission. On the next 2 slides, I will be talking about ongoing developments and trends vis-a-vis specific elements of the compensation package. They will be relating both to the benefits and allowances that are applicable to all of us, as well as with specific elements for colleagues who are based in the field duty stations. And that's basically everybody outside of Geneva, as well as the centers of our regional offices, and even that will be applicable to those. First of all, let's have a look at the 3 main players that are taking part in the current process from the WHO perspective. We have 3 main actors: UN organizations, WHO being included into that. We have FICSA, we have a say in the current process. We don't have the decision-making authority, but we have the authority to advise, to alert, to inform, to dispute, as well as to propose. And we have a 3rd player, which is UN member states. That's the entity that has the authority, but even they don't have the authority just to do whatever they want without consulting us. On the issues relating to what the position of the UN organizations is in the current compensation review, it is very much aligned with what staff associations and federations think. UN organizations, WHO included, are encouraging member states to think that indeed fiscal discipline is very important these days, but fiscal discipline should not undermine the efficiency of the common system to deliver. That's a very powerful statement from the executive heads, recognizing that we do have financial issues, but it is not only about the money. It is also about how we can plan and deliver our work in the future. We also quite clearly state that for the UN common system to be able to find, to attract, and to keep the staff at their positions, cost containment should be approached carefully, not to disrupt the process. The common system organizations also very candidly align with FICSA position and state that whatever a staff member gets as a compensation should be reflective of what has been expected to perform of the individual staff member, of the organization as a whole, and of the common system, but also the associated risk of a particular assignment. And finally, the last big principle, the foundation principle, I would say, that the UN common system management is translating and communicating to the member states is that whatever changes are going to be, whether they are due to the fiscal issues and whatnot, they should not undermine the core of the UN, which is independence of civil service. They emphasize on the principle of the noble mayor to be able to attract best in class from all over the place, but also our compensation package should be comparable. It cannot be as a standalone issue. It should be compared to something that exists in the world, whether it is a World Bank compensation package, the compensation package that is given at NATO, EU institutions, civil service of the organizations, as well as of individual member states. Currently, we are using US Federal Service as the comparator for the compensation package for international recruit staff members. FICSA very much aligns with all of these points, and we add also our 2 points. The first one, I think it is one of the most important, if not the most important, to my opinion. It's the word predictability. We all understand that the financial situation in the world has changed and most probably will continue to changing. We all understand that there may be a need for further optimization of the package. And by optimization, it includes both removal of some elements, replacement of some elements, maybe expansion of other elements. What we emphasize is that whenever member states request any revision, It must be done in a systematic manner. It must be done predictably so that those who sign up the contract with UN can plan their future. If particularly this relates to colleagues who have children or dependent spouses or family members, you rely on a particular predictability vis-a-vis what you will be able to deliver in a particular duty station in terms of work and life balance. We also stress on the fact that it is not only about salary. It is not only about our core net base home take pay. We are also emphasizing that staff work for the UN not because of the salary, but also because of the broader value employment proposition. For some, it may be insurance. For others, it may be the pension. For the third group of people, maybe something different. But it is definitely not just pure native salary that we are looking at. Now comes the member states. This is where the situation is a bit tricky. They, of course, have a totally different position. They are, as I mentioned, the decision makers, but they are also the custodians of the entire common system, and it is in their interest to ensure that the system works together as it is intended to do. They listen to us, they listen to FICSA. Some of the member states are less vocal than the others. Some of them value FICSA's opinion because this is the only credible source that they may have about the reality of service in HQ and field duty stations. Some of them are less collaborating with the common system and staff associations. We try every single avenue. Every single member state deserves the right to say, but also has the responsibility to listen to us. And we take every opportunity possible. The trip to New York, which I mentioned on the margins of a General Assembly, normally takes place between 2 to 3 weeks, where FICSA leadership goes and meets every single member state possible, particularly those who are undecided or have very strong opinions, but also making sure that we reconfirm to the traditional supporters of the common system that you need to maintain that belief in the common system and in the people that serve it. So what are member states' positions? Well, they're quite predictable, frankly speaking, but they are manageable. The compensation package for the UN is too complicated to understand. Well, it has a lot of elements. That's the complexity. But they also say that the UN system is very complex. Many agencies, many organizations, many implementations, whatnot. We don't focus on the complexity of the system. We focus on explaining to them why the compensation package is what it is now. And we are explaining them the rational element behind each of the compensation package items, why it is there, so that they understand the complexity indeed of the situation, but also the need of the compensation package to be as broad as it is. The second point, which we've heard quite a lot, and I think it is important for all of us to keep in mind, is that member states think that we are overpaid, nothing new here, but they also think that we are having a lot of entitlements. The discourse that FICSA has changed among the staff federations, but also within the United Nations Common System Organization, is that we don't approach what you get as an entitlement. We approach it from the perspective of compensation for the service that we provide. If somebody is serving in a very difficult duty station somewhere in South Sudan and is getting a danger pay, it is not the entitlement. It is a compensation for the harsh living conditions that that person is facing while delivering their duties. We are trying to change the discourse. In our engagement with member states, we want to really remove this element of an entitlement and to really focus on the compensation as the core of the discussion. Many member states want to see margins gone. Some member states want to see margins remaining at the level of 101 to 105, meaning that we can earn up to 5% more than the US civil servant, for instance. That's a danger for us because our entire compensation package is linked just to one comparator, US civil service. And we don't really know what the compensation package and how the system will look like in the US in 2 to 3 to 5 years. We all remember what happened with USAD. We all remember what happened with DOD and so on and so forth. So our absolute position is that margins must remain. Margins must remain as a concept, and margins must remain in the numerical value for us to be able to attract and retain qualified, best-in-class professionals from around the world. Some member states want to cap certain benefits. This is a bit more difficult fight to go against because it has specific financial implications, and these are the easiest financial savings to achieve. You simply put the cap on a particular benefit and allowance and done deal. This would make sense if we were dealing with machines, but we are dealing with human beings, and the diversity of the situations and the complexity that every staff member may have is not just resolved by putting the caps. We are also understanding that there are some battles which are unfortunately need to be lost for the war to be won. We are not giving up, but we also understand that being extremely demanding and pushy is not always the right place to go. There were some discussions about the rationale for mobility incentive and why it needs to be paid when anyway international recruit staff members must be mobile, and let's actually introduce non-financial incentives and so on and so forth. Our position is very adamant about that. It's fine to introduce non-financial incentives, nobody's objecting that, but they should not be used instead of monetary benefits. I'll discuss a bit later on what the current discourse is vis-a-vis that particular item. What we also find quite interesting is the reflections about the UN 80. We're pretty sure that all member states would be in favor of UN 80, but several of them quite influential member states were not particularly in favor of UN 80 for fear that if implemented prematurely would have direct impact on geographical diversity, particularly from specific regions of the world. This is the complexity of the issues that we've been dealing with member states and that find direct impact on the elements of the compensation package. So I'll start with the first development and what it entails. This is particularly relevant for the colleagues who serve in non-family duty stations, so duty stations where DSS doesn't allow you to bring your recognized family member. The working group is looking at designing a family hub model that would allow you to bring your family member in a location that is defined as a family duty station and which at the same time is closer to where you are currently serving in a non-family duty station. Our main emphasis on this particular proposal is that it must be voluntary by nature and should not replace the current model, whereby if you serve in a non-family duty station, you keep your families in a family duty station where they maybe normally live and you receive a non-family service allowance. We don't want these to be replaced. We want staff to have choice. Either you want to keep your family where your family is, or you bring them somewhere in a proximity to the duty station where you are served and to the duty station, which is family-friendly duty station. It's still not finalized. There's an ongoing work to be done and to link to other elements of the compensation to ensure that there's no overlap. We are hoping to finalize this in July, and our prediction is that this family hub model most probably will be adopted by the General Assembly as an option for the family member, for the staff members to benefit from. The second item that is being looked at is what is called D&E pilot. This is an option for colleagues who serve in very difficult duty stations which are D&E category, but which are not non-family, meaning you can bring your families there. However, you don't bring them there because there are no schools, there's only one metal container, there are no hospitals, it's plus 65 degrees or minus 45 year round, so you don't want your family there because it's in reality a liability to the organization. So what happened several years ago is that to limit this liability to the organization, ICIC proposed D&E pilot, whereby it says that if you serve in D&E family duty station, but we don't want you to bring the family there, we'll give you $14,000 or $15,000 and you keep your family station at home, your family at home. That is a pilot that was very much well taken up by many organizations, including WHO. Our position is that, first of all, it needs to be formalized. The pilot has been for 4 years in existence. Now it needs to become a part of the compensation package. We also want to explore possible links with family model, with family hub model, so that one doesn't replace the other. We want to give as many options to colleagues as possible so that they have a choice to do what they want to do. Now, the colleagues who serve in the duty station that receive rest and recuperation, you know that on a regular cycle, you would leave your duty station to R&R destination, but you wouldn't be getting your DSA for those 4 or 5 days that you will be outside of the duty station in a duty station, which is R&R place. There was some discussions about, well, staff should be paid this this DSA in addition to the ticket to get to this duty station. Nothing changes on the ticket. Ticket is still refunded, or you take a UN transportation if it's available. However, there will be no payment. There will be no introduction of the DSA payment because that component is already reflected in the staff salary. So the money that they would spend in their home duty station would normally then be spent in R&R destinations. So it's basically no loss, no gain. This is what we were looking at as one of the sort of bargaining elements, understanding also the financial pressure that the common system is experiencing currently. There will be also slight changes to the cycles. So now we have 6, 8, 12 cycles plus 4, which is uniquely authorized by the chair. But there won't be major changes to the implementation of this particular benefit. On the evacuation, there were some proposals from member states to what they call rationalize the evacuation and its duration, with some member states basically implying that, well, if you stay in a particular duty station long enough, you get used to bombs and to shooting, so why should we care that? We adamantly refuted the statement, and fortunately, that idea was buried where it belongs, which was in the trash bin. And so the position that FICSA made, and organizations also subscribed it, is that cost should not undermine the duty of care. Duty of care will always come before the cost, and that will remain. However, if somebody is evacuated, then all eligible allowances will be based on your physical location. So if you're evacuated to a duty station, which is hardship A, when you don't get any hardship allowance, you're not getting your hardship allowance. If you're evacuated in a duty station where the post adjustment is lower than the duty station from which you are evacuated, it's rational to assume and to think that you will be also getting a lower post adjustment because you will have lower expenses. The evacuation allowance will remain as it was. Now, this discussion about non-financial incentives. We saw where it was going, basically replace hardship and mobility with non-financial incentive, and it was packaged in a way that removed those elements and put non-financial incentive, for instance, the frequency of mobility in terms of the need for the career development, meaning if you want to go from one grade to another, you need to have completed at least 2 rotations. We objected to that, first of all, because the HR rules across the organizations are very different, so we cannot have a harmonized approach. Second of all, we said that non-financial incentives don't really serve this purpose. The purpose to compensate for what the staff member is experiencing by taking that assignment. We don't object to non-financial incentives being introduced as a complementary, but not really as a replacement. We also objected to then be replaced by 1 day leave, 2 day leave, because it is still a financial cost to the organization. To give you a perspective, what the non-financial incentives would be, the discussion was about a certificate, a thank you letter from your regional director, or in most cases a pen, which also gives you a financial cost to the organization. So that, fortunately, discussion will be put into bed, and it will not resume, at least until the end of this year. What happens next year, we don't really know. On the mobility, the Civil Service Commission confirmed that it is working as intended. What I mean here, it's implementation from the financial perspective. So how often you get paid, from which rotation you get paid. They're not looking at the implementation at the organization level, how many people move or not. They're not looking at that. They're looking at the implementation modality of the financial element. However, there is a request from the GA to look at defining a common framework for mobility across the organization, and this is primarily to encourage inter-organizational mobility, and that leads us to thinking that the GA is seriously looking into mergers of the UN organizations into something more manageable, and that would allow then the transfer of those who survive from one organization to a newly created organization. This is a task that the Commission will be doing in the next 2 years, and let's see if this also remains in the 2026 UNGA resolution on these tough elements. There's also a discussion about possible phasing out of certain elements after a certain period of time. So, for instance, those of you who work in HQ duty stations, you know that your rental subsidy will disappear after 7 years of your presence in the duty station. There was a discussion about potential phasing out of the some of the elements of the compensation package, even in field duty stations, after a certain period of time. So, for instance, if you stay for 5 years 6 years in Burkina Faso, then on the 6th year, you no longer receive your rental subsidy. We don't know where the discourse will go. We're opposed to this approach, and we stick by the fact that field elements should not be phased out after a certain period of time. Their phasing out should be linked to objective situation, like danger pay, for instance. If the danger disappears, danger pay disappears. If danger appears, danger pay appears. So phasing out should be done on the basis of objective criteria rather than simply on the basis of time. The final element of this page will be the review entitlements. All of these entitlements, which are mentioned on this page and on the next page, they are normally reviewed once every 3 years to see how much payment should be done. The proposal is currently to move from 3 to 4 years. It will bring not substantial savings to the entire common system. We are looking maybe at a couple of millions for the entire common system, which is peanuts. But this is something that also member state needs to report to their capitals as a cost-saving measure. And so this is what we most probably will agree to as a bargaining way to preserve something which is much more fundamental and much more central to the overall compensation package. And of course, there will be no changes to the methodology on how these entitlements are calculated. So they will be linked to the base for salary. Some of them will continue to be linked to the P4 step 6 base for salary. Some of them will be linked to the DSA and whatnot. So though there will be no changes to the methodology, how they are being calculated. Now, my last slide on the compensation package will deal also with the elements of the compensation package which are relevant to everybody, HQ and non-HQ duty stations. So there was a discussion about the relocation benefits being rationalized. And again, rationalized in this context meant reduction. We said that lump sum option remains the preferred modality for the organizations and for the staff members, as long as it is remaining an option. Currently, the amount which is being paid is $18,000 or $15,000, depending if you're traveling with family or as a single staff member. And it will remain potentially reviewed for the adjustment when the periodic adjustment kicks in. I believe it's next year, but we are not looking at any changes to the implementation of the relocation benefits. We will still have amount allocated to move things, to move staff, to help them settle in a new duty station when they decide to move. We also emphasize and were successful in keeping the way how this methodology is being used to calculate, which is 70% of the relocation cost up to the certain limit of 18,000. That approach will continue to be existing in organization. From the WHO perspective, we see more and more, of course, requests for the use of the lump sum options, with the organization-assisted travel primarily being at the appointment and at the separation from the organization. For the relocations, most probably we will see a trend where everything will be lump summed and the colleagues will be responsible for doing their own relocation, with the exception, of course, of visa issues. On the hardship allowance, there was a discussion about expanding the current category that consists of 6 duty station categories, H for HQ, and then A, B, C, D, E, A being the less difficult, E being the most difficult, and to add extra subcategories, particularly for B and C duty stations, to cover situations when the duty station is not difficult enough to be a C category, but it is more difficult than a traditional B category. On this one, the consensus wasn't reached. Federations would like to advocate for the slight expansion of categories of duty stations. The commissioners are a bit reluctant to that, so we'll see what will happen in Vienna. What is very interesting is there's a much greater request for WHO WRs to be engaged in the process, particularly on the review of the hardship classification and its health component. That one is something that traditionally is the weakest in the submissions from duty stations when the revisions are done. Let's see how the organization will respond to this particular request from the GA, if GA, of course, decides to put this directly in the resolution. And now I will focus on 2 elements, education grant and the child grant, and I think that's where most of the colleagues will focus their attention. So on the education grant, I cannot share you the specificities of what is being under discussion simply because it is very confidential right now, and we are not allowed to share the details until they've been finalized and endorsed by the Civil Service Commission, by the 5th Committee, and approved by the General Assembly. So on this one, I am very sorry that I cannot give you the nitty-gritty. However, I'll give you as much information as possible to outline where the discourse is going. Currently, there are 3 options under review vis-à-vis education grant. One is to maintain current status quo. So whatever you get now, in terms of methodology, in terms of the amounts, in terms of how it is calculated, keep it as it is. The second option is to design a new model which gives colleagues an option to fund part of the education of their children, whether it is primary, whether it is higher, secondary, whatnot. So this is under development to find the way for a choice-based education grant. The third one is introducing completely new scheme. That is the least likely to happen. Once again, I cannot share the details with you, but I feel confident that this is most probably not going to be taking place, so there's no even point in discussing it further. In case of the staff members telework from the duty station for more than 2/3 of the academic year, and I think that this proposal will go ahead, there will be a prorating depending on the staff's member teleworking duty station. Even if a duty station is higher duty station, then it will maintain the original duty station rates. If it's lower, then it's going to be 2/3 even of that lower. So this is also something to keep in mind for the colleagues who are planning to telework and have their children in schools, that this will have a direct impact on eligibility of your benefits and allowances. When it comes to the special education grant, so this is for children with disabilities, we have very good news here. There was a revision of current caps and feasibility. The current cap is about $51,000, and that didn't include a lot of the families. What we advocated for and what FICSA was exceptionally successful is to increase this cap so that 90% of the families that would be eligible for the special education grant would be receiving and would be included into that cap of total admissible expenses. I believe that currently the discussion is that total admissible expenses for the 90th percentile of all eligible people will be around $80,000, which means that if your education grant for special education grant is 90,000, you won't be included. If it's 80 and less, you will be included. And based on the current calculation from the organizations, including WHO, this special education grant, if lifted up to 81,000, would include 90% of all eligible applications. Now, on child allowance. Unfortunately, as you know, for the last 14 years, the rates for the allowance, $3,322, I believe, remain unchanged for the last 14 years. What we've been advocating, and I think we will be successful, is that we put the stop to this. We say, fine, we maybe don't need to review it every 3 years, but we mandate it for every 5 years, and we design the ways to regulate it so that if after 5th year, the revision translates into the increase takes place, and not what we have right now, but for the past 14 years, every time when we did the revision, the increase was eligible, yet the General Assembly would disagree and say, no, maintain the previous rates. The Commission are in principle okay with that, but we still need to find how to put it so that it's palatable also for the General Assembly. I'm not having extremely high hopes for this particular element, but it's something that is definitely worth trying to fight for. The lump sum scheme is fit for purpose, of course, and we will continue to maintain it. And we will continue to link it to USD as one of the currencies that is that is used in the entire common system. And we don't want to switch to other currencies because of the administrative burden. And then all agencies will need to do a lot of implementations to the ERPs, and that will be very cost-consuming. There was also discussion about the possible caps, a discussion that is somewhat difficult to agree or to disagree, because there are cases, unfortunately, in the common system when the organizations are trapped in a situation, and this situation is not to blame staff members for, but the situations when a staff member may have 15, 20 children, and all of those children will be put through the entire education system. Of course, it's not the fault of a staff member that they decided to have that many children, and when they signed up to work for WHO, for instance, or for any other organization, there is no cap, or there wasn't a cap. Some organizations started putting the caps. Here, the possible discussion is to cap to 6 children maximum. Whether it flies or not, let's see. In some organizations, like I mentioned, the cap already exists, and the cap is 3 children. I don't think we are going to go to 3 children. Likely, we will most probably see the capping of this benefit up to the 6 children and then nothing else. On secondary dependence allowance, there was also a discussion about whether we want to reduce it. We absolutely said no. Staff members with secondary dependence allowance, particularly with disabilities, they already experience a lot of hardship, so we are not going to touch it. and we reaffirmed that parents who are secondary dependents, as well as siblings who are secondary dependents currently, will stay in the system. They are not going to be removed. You don't have to make choice either or. It's if your parent and or sibling can be classified as secondary dependent, they need to stay there. So on this, here I will stop talking about the compensation package. What I would like to mention to you briefly is something which I also think is very important and very often overlooked when it comes to these discussions. Everything what I've presented to you is, of course, not done by one person. It's not physically possible to do that. It's not mentally possible to do that. This is the result of a lot of work done by many people. Once again, it's your staff associations, it's their leadership, and it's our collective membership in the staff association that can allow us to be a part of this process. Many of you here most probably are members of staff association. Some of you maybe are not. If you are not a staff association member, but you would like to benefit from this kind of protection and fighting for your rights, for your benefits, please consider joining staff association. We operate on a completely voluntary basis, so it's our time that we decide to dedicate. We get a 10% release, but as everybody of you know, 10% release in organization means that you work 110 rather than 100%. Being a member in staff association is a very cost neutral to many of you, I would imagine. I'm not saying to all of you, but to many of you, it's 0.25% of your net base salary. So if your salary is $1,000, that will be 2.5. It's absolutely manageable for many of you. But it gives an opportunity for staff associations to be a formal professional organization. And it also gives us as staff associations an opportunity to support the work of FICSA. FICSA is the only federation. It's the oldest federation, and it's the only federation that has its physical presence in the terms of the secretariat, in the terms of the president and general secretary, and in terms of the executive committee members. This presence, of course, costs money, like everything in this world. The trips to New York cost money. The stay in New York costs money. FICSA operates under extremely tight and strict rules. So everything what is being spent is spent with absolute best value for money, but it still costs. Our membership in FICSA brings us enormous benefit. Like I mentioned, FICSA is the only source that we can communicate with the Civil Service Commission and the Fifth Committee members, and indirectly with the GA. FICSA is the only place where we can collectively voice our concerns, but also FICSA is the only agency that has a meaningful opportunity for us to advocate for the best of our interest. Staff associations, on the other hand, are our local internal capacities to advocate for the best of our interest. When I share this presentation, these are the links to the web pages of the staff associations of your respective regions. If you're not a member, please consider joining. In addition to getting this kind of information, the other benefits that you can get is legal support and advice. Everybody of you who's on this call in one way or another has gone through the current restructuring process. So you know that some of the colleagues unfortunately didn't make it. Some of them were separated under certain conditions and they are now fighting for their rights. Being a member of a staff association makes you eligible to receive certain level of legal support and advice when you need it. You can also be a part of the selection panels. This is also a very important part and a very big achievement of WHO, being one of the very, very, very few agencies where a staff rep must be present in the selection panel. So this is your opportunity to ensure that WHO selects the best candidates, but it's also a unique opportunity for you to understand how selection panels work for your future career development. Being a staff association, you can also shape and influence what your native staff association does. Maybe there are issues that you would like to bring to your attention, but you cannot. I'll give you an example of what we had in Euro, where half of our region speaks Russian language, and many of the medical bills that were submitted wouldn't be accepted because of Russian language, and it was a specific cost to the staff members to translate them. Through the membership in staff association, those group of people could bring this issue to the management, which is now being looked at, how to mitigate this, particularly when you have a critical mass of people using one specific language. You can also apply for the staff committee membership. That's a sort of a leadership unit within a staff association, and then you can even do your work there. You can engage with your senior management, with your RDs, if this is a part of your discourse, or DPMs and whatnot. So you can also get quite high to the organization's leadership. And above all, you can also be a part of the global staff-related matters discourse through your participation in FICSA. Every staff association will be participating in FICSA councils. Being a staff committee member or staff association member, depending on the rules and regulations of your staff association, you may also attend a council. You may also apply for elected positions of the council. I am finishing this year my position as the EXCO member on field issues, and through membership in FICSA EXCOM, I have an amazing opportunity to meet, first of all, the fifth committee members, the members of the UNGA, the Secretary General, the Undersecretary General on Business Management and Staff Relations, the chair of ICRC, to actually convey to them what our issues are, to listen from them what their issues are, to download from them some of the information that they cannot say publicly, but they would like them to be raised. After all, the staff of the International Civil Service Commission are very much like us, UN staff members, so they're affected as well by this, as well as the senior management of the UN, who also, due to the nature of their function, may not be able to say something what staff federations may be able to advocate to the member states. So this is also an opportunity for you to get engaged if you're interested. I'll stop here, and we can have a bit of a discussion now for any questions, feedback, understanding that I may be able to provide you answers to some questions, not to all. I'm not carrying the information on all of these issues, but if I cannot answer something, I can definitely take note of that and take it down. Thanks a lot, and I'll get back to Mina. Good to see you, Mina. Please.
Good morning, afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, colleagues, for joining us today. I'm speaking now as Staff Association Chair of WHO EMRO, and on behalf of all my fellows in the other regions, I would like to thank Sasha for his collective and his presentation, which is a very significant effort that we can see he had invested to simplify this very complex and this calculation behind the compensation package. So much appreciate, Sasha. Thank you for your effort, and you are our ambassador in FICSA in the field session, compensation from the field and compensation part. So thank you on behalf of all the Staff Association chairs, and of course, thank you to Staff Association Euro for organizing this. Thank you, dear.
Thanks so much, Mina, and always good to see you. And thank you always for your feedback that you bring to the council, particularly for the EMRO colleagues, because you guys are experiencing one of the most difficult situations that are on this planet. Sabera, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, and apologies if I don't. Please, you have the floor. You are still muted. Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Thank you.
Of course.
Actually, I'm maybe the one of the luckiest person who got the first chance, but you know, I'm locally a local staff and I'm national professional officer. But I have two queries to you, one queries and one suggestion I need from you. That is now if you go to the WHO website or any website, they considering that WHO and other UN organization recognize national professional officer as professional level staff. They apply professional classification standard comparable to the international recruited professional staff and other recognized relevant NPO experience as qualifying professional experience for international positions.
Right.
What is the current policy rationale for maintaining substantially different compensation and entitled framework between NPOs and internationally recruited professional staff? If you go to the WHO website, you will find that the requirements of qualification for international professional up to P1 to P4 and NOA to NOD is the same. And another thing, as I am the staff country chapter coordinator for the Staff Association of WHO Country Office Bangladesh, I will request you and our CS staff president that through which formal mechanism can concern and perspective of national professional officer be raised within the UN common system, including discussion with FICSA, ICSC, or just now I came to know about the fifth committee, who formally represents or advocates for NPO related concern at the global level, and what procedure or platforms are available for national professional staff to contribute to policy discussion related to career development, recognition, and compensation framework. These two
Understood.
is
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Savannah. Thank you very much. So let me start from the second question. The first point of contact should always be your staff association. You may have a smaller collection of colleagues in Bangladesh country office, given that most probably your presence there is quite substantial. So you may form an informal unit of like-minded people and you may start doing the preliminary work. But formal work starts with you reaching out to your staff association. I believe that Bangladesh is under Sierra region, so you may write to the Sierra Staff Association and voice your concerns. Then the staff association from Sierra would reach out to FICSA, and then we'll take it from there. In terms of the representation of the interest, FICSA, again, would be the best option to do because it is the only federation to which WHO belongs that can formally engage with the ICSC, Fifth Committee, One UN in Bonn office on staff-related matters. I think that issues dealing with locally recruited staff members, particularly on the salary component, are dealt with one HR network in Bonn. The elements that are a part of the compensation package for the nationally recruited staff members have been set up many, many years ago by the General Assembly, as far as maybe 40 or 50 years ago. And if we want to open the discussion about how to change them, again, your starting point would be your staff association. Going back to the first question, why there is a discrepancy? I will give you an answer which you would hear most probably from the official sources, and I can also share my opinion. The official and currently valid response is that the compensation package for the locally recruited staff members is based and defined by the cost of labor. And you would be getting the equivalent of a national civil service of the country where you serve. Most, if not all of the countries where we have national civil service provide compensation such as salary. They would give health insurance, pension fund, all that stuff. None of the national civil servants would give hardship or mobility for the colleagues who are based in the home country. So if a diplomat from Dhaka is working in Juba, I'm sure that diplomat is getting some of the elements as an expert. But if that diplomat is coming back to Dhaka, then he wouldn't be getting the same benefits as if he would if he was serving in a hardship duty station. And so this is the same approach which is being practiced. Locally recruited colleagues are remunerated on the basis of cost of labor. That's the Fleming's principle. International recruit staff members are remunerated on the basis of the cost of living, so-called the noble mayor principle. This has been since the dawn of the establishment of the common system. Right now, I'll give you a very honest answer. I don't see it changing, but things need to start from somewhere. Perhaps it will start from your request to the Staff Association, and in 20 years, we will remember you as the one who completely put the entire system upside down. But for the time being, this is how the situation is.
Yeah, we know the system. So thank you for your answer. And definitely we'll request through you in this meeting. We will communicate with CR Staff Association. We know the reason it is written in everywhere. So we need some
Right.
changes. Thank you.
Right. Good luck. Geoffrey, I think I pronounced your name correctly, I hope.
Thanks, Alexandra,
Geoffrey?
for the great presentation. Very quickly, in
Sure.
your discussions on the education grant specifically, has there been a discussion on the cessation of education grant for university study, or it's not on the cards? Thank you.
Again, without going into the nitty-gritty, which I cannot share, there is an ongoing discussion about that, but to not completely scare you, we are not looking at the complete removal of the tertiary education. But there is a discussion about optimizing it so that you have a choice that will also include parts of the higher education. Guy Penne or Guy, I'm sorry, I would imagine probably it's Guy if it's French, but pardon
Yes,
if I'm
it's
wrong.
French. So Guy, you were right in pronouncing the French way. Okay, thank you for your very useful presentation and very clear. I just want to ask you a question about, so you mentioned that the salary component, there's a reduction and an increase in the salary and a reduction in the PA. But for the allowances, so I understand it's still being discussed, like education and so you said no for dependents. But I still remember the cut on the boarding component of the education grant, which was implemented suddenly a few years ago. So my question is, if there will be further reduction or cuts on those allowances in the future, will it apply to all every staff or only for entering people with new contracts? Because the boarding decision of the education component was a breach of the contract we signed in the past for all staff, and I clearly need to know whether it would be the same applied to all staff, or like the pension, when the pension age was modified, it was modified for new staff, and then you had the option to have it on a voluntary basis for old staff. So this was my concern. Yeah.
Thank you, Guy. So this is exactly the point which we are making to the Commission, the predictability. If you sign a contract, you want to make sure that whatever you sign is maintained while you are under the contract. Our main position is that, first of all, if our ultimate one is that no changes. We don't want to cut midway. We want it to preserve and to maintain as it is. If it comes to the revisions and to the introduction of lower caps, whatnot, we want, first of all, to have a phase-in period to cover the current staff members to be able to adjust to that situation. If that is not going to fly, we would insist on exactly what you mentioned with the pension fund, that it would be applicable only to the new entrants colleagues, and those who have an acquired right basically will maintain the benefit. Some member states are okay with this proposal. They understand that eventually the system will balance out and the financial benefit will be visible and achievable in a bit longer period of time, but it will be available. Some member states are very adamant to cut everything in now. Among member states themselves, there is no clear agreement, simply because the member states also have their members serving in the UN who may be directly impacted by these decisions. So right now, we do not envisage that it's going to be an abrupt cut for everybody. My crystal ball that I don't have tends to believe that it will be phased in with the mandatory application for new entrants. The next hand is from Javel. I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. You're still on mute if you're trying to say something. Javel Iqbal.
Oh, okay, it's me. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you very much for the briefing. It was very nice. I have just one specific question, which is on the education grant. My child, dependent child education grant for 2025-26 has been processed, and I received the tuition fee plus the registration fee, but not the component which was related to the flat rate boarding entitlement, which used to be a good amount, like more than 5,000. So I have raised a ticket, but I wanted to know, is there any change to the policy or this is omission?
Not that I'm aware of, but this is something that you should discuss with your HR focal point. I admittedly am not, I don't have children, so I'm not dealing with those things. So my knowledge on that is somewhat limited. But I think your first point would be HR. If HR colleagues may not provide you a satisfactory answer, you may wish to raise this issue with your staff association. But I'm not aware of any changes midway. But again, I cannot 100% subscribe to that, unfortunately.
Thank you. I have raised a ticket with the GSD, so I'm following up, but up till now, I have not received the response. Thank you.
Sure. The next person on the list is Ajal.
It's Hajia, Sasha. Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you so very much for this presentation. Very, very helpful. Thanks again. Sasha, I put my inquiry in the chat window, but still I thought maybe it would be better if I, get through directly. When I joined the international position, my son was, in his last 2 years of college. And that's the 5th and 6th because it's School of Medicine. So when I applied for the dependency support, they told me that the support goes for the first 4 years. And I couldn't understand why, because, it's unfair when some colleagues, dependents, go for this education support right from 6 years until 21, maybe end of college. And then when a staff member has only 2 years of support left for a dependency, the request is declined. Then the other thing very quickly is that when I got my reassignment, there was something mentioned on my reassignment letter, non-eligibility for mobility, or mobility is non-eligible. And I just wanted to know, are there any things stipulating the mobility for staff reassigned to international service or not? Thank you very much once again, Sasha, over to you.
Sure, thank you. Let me start with the second question. And again, I think overall this is maybe better addressed by a HR specialist, but I'll try to recap as much as possible from my knowledge. When you join when you go from national to international, or if you join directly as an international, your first assignment sort of is not sort of subject to mobility, if I may say it this way. If you are based currently in a regional office or in NHQ duty station, also that, well, in regional office, in Euro, that wouldn't count. In other offices, it would, but your first assignment sort of doesn't make you eligible for the mobility for the mobility allowance. The mobility kicks in after the second eligible posting, and then it goes, I think, 2 to 3, 4 to 6, and 7 plus. These are the cycles, basically. So you would need to discuss this with your HR focal point, what it means. Indeed, we have also some positions within the organization that are so-called non-mobile positions and not subject to the rotation. I don't have the list of those positions, but in principle, this is better to be addressed with your HR to get guidance on that. I would say if this is your first assignment, indeed, you're not eligible for the mobility. From the second move, depending where you move, if you move from where you are to Geneva, you would not be eligible, but it would still count as a move. And then if you move from Geneva to Jayburg, that would be your third appointment, that would be eligible for mobility. On the comment about your son and education grant, this is also a difficult question I don't have the answer for. This is how the system functions for the time being. The system isn't perfect and it covers the majority, and unfortunately in your case, you didn't fit into that majority. Whether it is good, absolutely no. Can you personally change it right now? No, but what can be done? Raise this issue with your staff association, ask them to look into that and see how it goes. And we can always bring this. We can always bring this from the staff association to the FICSA, and then FICSA can look into that and get maybe even a formal response from the Civil Service Commission. The next on the list I have Andrew. Great to see you, well, at least to hear most probably, Andrew. But you're still muted. Andrew?
Hi, can you hear me
now? Yes, we can hear you now. Great to hear you.
Hi, how are you doing? Yeah, good to see you, Sasha. And thanks a lot for the presentation, much appreciated. I'm not sure if I actually have a question here, but just some comments. And I'm sort of looking at it from the perspective of being in a e-duty station, in a hardship duty station, but more generally, as we're moving forward in these times, I'm just thinking, in terms of like the financial situation is, we all agree is dire. There's, a lot of advocacy and push from some member states to reform. WHO has just introduced a new ERP, it's BMS, so there's all these processes being transitioned. Can we have a collective effort among the staff associations to look at policies and procedures and whether or not they are fit for purpose? A lot of the policies and procedures we have are decades old, for example. I've tried to broach some of these things, and the feedback I get is there's no appetite for this right now. But really and truly, in terms of particularly like the e-manual policies, what is value added, what is fit for purpose, what can be simplified, because there's a lot of things that are just way too bureaucratically cumbersome, to have to deal with all the time.
Absolutely, Andrew. This is something that is not a part of the compensation review, because compensation review is looking at the system level rather than the organization-specific rules. But this is a valid discussion to have with the AMRO Staff Association, and then to bring it at the level of GEO, where all of the staff associations meet, and maybe even bring it to the attention of the management at the next GSMC, if it's appropriate, and if the agenda still allows for the discussion. But absolutely.
When is the next GSMC?
Anita, can I put you on spot if you remember?
Yeah, it's in November, I think 13th November.
Okay,
Voila, I think
well
they
noted.
were moving it because there was some, after we already agreed for the date was agreed, there was some request because of the unavailability of one of the region, but it's in November, mid-November.
Great,
Okay,
thank
thanks a
you.
lot.
Thanks. Over to Vala, please.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you so much. Nice to
Great
see
to
you.
see you.
My question is related to the field service category and whether the compensation package is applicable to them and what is the difference between the normal international professional and the field service category. Thank you.
So we don't have a specific category of staff, which are called FS or field service staff. These are particularly sitting at DPKO, Department of Peacekeeping Operations. When I say field, I mean every duty station that is not in Geneva and not in a regional office. For WHO, all colleagues who are based in non-Geneva, non-regional office are considered sort of field duty stations, but the compensation package is the same in terms of base floor, in terms of health insurance, for instance, but the difference kicks in when the mobility is paid. Mobility is not paid for H and regional duty stations, particularly for Copenhagen, for instance. The mobility, the rental subsidy for Geneva and I think for other duty stations is capped at a number of years. But of course, danger pay wouldn't be paid, R&R wouldn't be paid, but the absolute core and foundation is the same. FS category, which is not applicable for WHO, is not a part of this comprehensive review, but for us it's not relevant because we don't have FS category. Sure. And handing over to Amani, please.
Dear Sasha, thank you so much. This is a Herculean effort. It is fascinating. Honestly, we are very grateful. My name is Amani
Thank you.
Siam. I'm from the CRO region. Honestly, we've never had such a comprehensive briefing. So I thank you and everybody who's putting an ounce of effort into this. And I do agree with you, this is not a 10% release. You guys are living it and breathing it, and we can see that. I just wish to give you a reflection. It will be just a bit more helpful if your presentation ends with like maybe not, it's too difficult to put a summary, but like if you have like a watch list, like if you carry us over to what's next, you know, I understand fully the complexity, the negotiations and the implications, to be honest. But if you can have like an executive summary just at the end for us to just help you if we can going forward, because you have to task staff also. Yes, of course, honorably, we all have to be members of this, you know, the staff association. That's our duty. It's not just an option. But I think this is a very big, it's a very heavy lift, and we as staff, I very much believe in what you've said. If we really do not guard these kind of benefits, we as an agency and as a broader UN family, we will not attract the best staff. You know, we will be stuck in a way that we cannot hand over to our next generation that has to come and carry the principles and the mandate of the UN. But just taking the floor to express sincere gratitude and thanks for this. And as I said, please, just an executive summary at the end of the PPT will really guide us to how we can also help you back, you know, not just a one-way duty of care and provisions of support. Thank you, and thanks to all the team who's doing this. We don't know them, but please express sincere thanks. And I take the moment to thank my own staff association in CRO, Gautam Ji and his colleagues. They are also troopers. They really are doing their best, and we witnessed cuts and they did their best, and we live it with them, and we thank them also for their support. Thank you, Sasha, and all the best.
Thank you, Amani. Really appreciate the kind words, and definitely we'll try to do the summary next time. We are hoping to, at least in my head, it's still flying, and I'm hoping to convince the rest of the team that I'm working with to do this kind of briefing also early in January 2027, when we have the resolution adopted by the General Assembly. And that's basically where all of the cards will be revealed, and we will be able to translate those very complex messages that will be found in the annual report of the Civil Service Commission, which will be released sometime in August, September this year, in some of the briefings from the Fifth Committee, to translate them into easy to digest pieces of information and then to do a summary. So I'll definitely look into that. And if we all are still here with organizations next year, then count on me doing that. Thank you. Okay, we have 2 more minutes. Ritesh, good to see you. Please go ahead.
Yes, Sasa, thank you very much, Sasa, for the presentation. It was very informative and well explained, and we really appreciate your efforts. That's the reason we remember in the FICSA, this we want your we support you, and you want encourage to continue your participation in the FICSA. And thank you FICSA team for their support also. And regarding our colleague colleague says, like we will also here we'll discuss internally here, and we can collect all the query concern I will raise to FICSA also. So once again, Sasa, for your support, for your time, and thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Ritesh, and thank you always for being so active at FICSA Council. One last comment, dear colleagues. So based on the presentation that I did yesterday, unfortunately, somehow the Teams doesn't allow us to share the presentation in the chat here. The button, which is called Add File, doesn't pop up. And I think it is the same in the current chat. So what we are going, got it. So what we are going to do is a bit of a different way. I have another presentation today for the colleagues in Washington, D.C. in 2.5 hours. Once we've collected all of the recordings and this one presentation, which is the same, Euro colleagues will make a note, an announcement on our intranet. We'll put the presentation, we'll put 3 recordings as links, and then we will disseminate to the presidents of staff associations the link to the news, and then the colleagues from the staff associations of respective regions will then disseminate this information to the rest of their teams. We don't want to send it to all of, because somebody may be excluded, somebody may not be included. So we will do that way. And of course, the recording and the presentation will be available in that link, which we will create most probably early next week or tomorrow if I have mental space. Great. Well, we are almost on time. Great. Thank you very much for being here and for listening and for understanding the complexities. And thank you very much for being a part of Staff Association. Those of you who are not part of Staff Association, please do consider joining. Only collectively we can protect what Amani mentioned, we can preserve and we can make it better, because ultimately it all affects us. Whether you're a Staff Association member or not, you will be affected. So it's better if we are an army of big to protect what we have. One thing to conclude, one thing which I always say to the colleagues is that the management, the ICAC, the Fifth Committee members, and the GA, they're not our enemies. They are our partners. It's a unique partnership, a partnership where we learn and they learn, we convince and they convince. So we are approaching this from the perspective of collegial relationship. However, size also matters. The bigger and the greater we are, the more serious they will take us and the more careful they will be with trying to undermine us. Thank you very much. And of course, wishing you a nice afternoon, a good start of the weekend to the colleagues in AMRO. And as our famous president once said from the association, in solidarity, we strive for the best. Thanks. All the best. Have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
Sasha.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Sasha.
Thank you, Sasha, indeed. Thank you very much.